I hope you all have gotten a chance to see on the preview slide the preview for Advent coming up. I know I kind of feel like when I put that together, I kind of felt like Walmart putting up the Christmas stuff before Halloween was actually done. But I wanted to give you all kind of a preview of what's coming up. And we have, from what I've heard from you all, is that you do want to do the Christmas Eve service on Saturday night and then the Christmas Day service on Sunday morning. So we're going to continue as normal for that. And if you can attend all of those or some of those, please do. We would love to have you here with us for as much as possible. Yesterday I was at a wedding and worked with Smoke Joe again, and I was talking to him. He was talking about your wedding, and the last time we were there was kind of funny. I just saw you guys something like that. I gotta say that. Sorry, ADD moment. Yeah. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about service. We kind of continuing on the theme that we had last week as we ended our series on the book of Romans. We're going to talk about service in a little different way today. A man from out east had always dreamed of owning a cattle ranch and had finally saved enough money to buy his dream spread in Wyoming. His best friend flew out to visit and he said, "So what's the name of your ranch?" His buddy told him that he really had a hard time coming up with a catchy name that he liked, and he and his wife couldn't agree on what to call it, so they settled on the Double R Lazy L Triple Horseshoe Bar 7 Lucky Diamond Ranch. His friend was really impressed and asked, "Wow, so where are all the cows?" To which the new rancher supplies, "Well, we had quite a few, but none of them survived the branding." We've been focusing on ways that we can, like last week we talked about ways to serve. And I want this morning to suggest that it's possible to get caught up in what we call our spiritual gifts. We talked about some of the spiritual gifts last week, and that we might not survive servanthood if we get so caught up in those gifts. The key is not so much to identify what we have, but to use what we have been given. In 1 Peter chapter 4 tells us that each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. So today we're going to look at one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, Matthew chapter 25. If you want to go ahead and turn in your Bibles there, or I have up on the slide, we'll have the passage there as well. Oh, and in the back, on the shelving, on the very bottom, there's a bunch of Bibles. If you don't have a Bible at home, you're welcome to take one home. I just want to make mention of that. We had, as we moved the chairs around, we noticed that the Bibles, we put the Bibles underneath in a little convenient shelving underneath the chairs, but we noticed that they were getting kind of dinged up. So we've been taking them out of there and putting them back there so that they don't get all beat up and we have to keep replacing them. So anyway, so that's why if you don't happen to have one, you can grab one from the back. Okay, so Matthew chapter 25, beginning with verse 14. "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, according to his ability. He went on his journey. To the man who received 5 bags of gold, went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold had gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5, said, 'Master, you entrusted me with 5 bags. See, I have gained 5 more.' The master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' The man with 2 bags of gold also came. 'Master, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' Then came the man who received 1 bag of gold. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you had not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned I could have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has been given more, they will have in abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Wow, that's kind of harsh. We talked last week about Paul's words about servanthood. And now we're going to conclude with Jesus' teaching here about our responsibility to use what he has given us. So let's set the context here. The parable comes in the section of Matthew's Gospel where Jesus is giving an answer to his disciples' question about his second coming. They ask in 24:3, they say, when will this happen and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus warns them to be on guard so that no one will deceive them, and helps them to understand that once he leaves, he's going to come back. He challenges them in Matthew chapter 24, verse 44, and he tells them to be ready because the Son of Man will come at an hour when he is least expected. So in chapter 25, Jesus compares his coming to the Eastern custom of a bridegroom arriving in the middle of the night. Now, we wouldn't expect that in our country and our culture today, but back then, that's the way it was done sometimes. He concludes in 25:13 by saying, therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. And chapter 25 goes on, after the section we just read, it goes on to describe the separation of the sheep and the goats. Sandwiched in between is this parable that we just read. And in verse 14, he starts out with, again, it will be like a man going on a journey. The word again is an indication that what Jesus is going to say next is another parable that he's using to explain future events. The man going on that journey is Jesus. As we walk through this powerful passage, we're going to see 7 stewardship lessons that we need to remember. The first one is, what we have is not ours. Verse 14 continues by saying that this man who was getting ready for a journey, he called his servants and he entrusted his property to them. It was common for wealthy men to take long journeys. Before they would leave, they would arrange to have someone pick up their mail and feed their pets and take care of things like that. But even more than that, they would delegate control and multiplication of their wealth to trustworthy employees. They were expected to bring a return on what had been handed over to them. Given the uncertainties of transportation in those days, the time of return for even a well-planned trip was often open-ended. You never knew when he was going to be back. So there was no doubt in the minds of these servants that the property and the money still belonged to the master. It wasn't like he gave them 5 bags of gold and said, here's a bonus. It was like, this is mine. I want a return on it. So they were possessors, but they were not the owners. Their job was to manage what they had been given. And likewise, we must remember that everything we have has been given to us and is not really ours anyway. Psalm 24 tells us that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. And again in the Bible in Haggai chapter 2, verse 8 says, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty. He has the rights, and I have the responsibility. He is the master and I am the manager. I am the servant and he is the sovereign. Have you ever allowed that basic principle to permeate your mind, to permeate your life? You don't really own anything. It's not my van, it's God's. It's not my money, it's God's. It's not my house, it's God's. It's not my time, it's God's. Everything belongs to God. Until we recognize that truth, we're not going to be good managers of what He has entrusted to us. If I see it as my time, I'm okay wasting my time playing on Facebook. Right? If it's my time, I can do with it what I want. I can watch movies, sit there and watch TV, do what I want to do, play games on Facebook, play games, whatever, play video games. You know, I can be the best Call of Duty person ever. If it's my time. If it's God's time, is that the best way to spend my time? Probably not. So we have to think in terms of that. Our days are in His hands. Our gifts and our abilities are on loan from Him. Our money is in advance from the Almighty. Our houses, our clothes, our cars, every possession we have really doesn't belong to us. We really don't own anything. The second point that I want you to consider is that we're given what we can handle. You know, a lot of times, and that's a tough one to think because, you know, we see some people who are wealthy, and it's like, man, I wish I had that kind of money. I wouldn't worry about the bills. You know, because if you're like me, you wonder, okay, I know I've got these bills coming, okay. You know, wouldn't it be nice to not have to look at a price tag anymore? Wow! I've known a few people like that in my life that they don't even look. You know, you ask them, how much is a gallon of milk? No clue. How much is a gallon of gas? I have no idea. Why? Because I don't look at the prices tags. I just buy it. If I need a gallon of milk, I buy a gallon of milk. If I need this, I buy it. If I need a new TV, I go out and buy it. I don't think about it, I just do it. Because they have that kind of money. I'm like, I gotta wait for the sales. You know, I gotta look, you know, it's 5 cents difference if I go to Walmart than Kroger. I'm going to Walmart because I need that 5 cents, you know? There's a difference. So, but we're given what we can handle. In verse 15, we see that the master gave some talents to 3 of his servants, and some translations use money, like bags of gold, and some use the word talent, which is a measure of money also. We'll talk about that in a minute, but to the one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his ability. So the master recognized that each individual that he was talking about, these 3 individuals that he was talking about, that he was dealing with, each of them had different abilities. God's like that with us. Obviously, not everybody can handle money well. God knows that. So, some of us, He doesn't bless with money. And some of us, He says, okay, that's going to be a struggle for you. I'm going to give you a little bit so it doesn't become a big problem. Okay, God, I get you. You know. And you can look at it another way too. Some people are artistic. If I was artistic, that would be a problem for me. Because I would want to be a tattoo artist. Seriously. Seriously. I love tattoos. I love that whole culture. But I'm not artistic, so I can't do that. So that's just off my plate. You really don't want a tattoo from me. Okay? Honestly. It would not look good. It would look like, you know, Picasso. When you were after a Rembrandt, it's not going to happen. So God took that off my plate. Okay? I can still appreciate it. I can still appreciate those tattoos. When I see a good one, I comment on it. You know, I can appreciate good artists and the work that they do for that, all the hours that they've done. So we're given what we can handle. We need to pause in order to recognize that word, the talent. I told you we're going to talk about that. Talent is different from our present day understanding. A talent is not like a dollar bill. Talent was used as a measure of weight. And in Revelation 16, verse 21, we read, from the sky, huge hailstones about 100 pounds each fell upon men. A talent was used to indicate a very large sum of money. Its value varied depending on whether it was copper, silver, or gold. While some commentators differ on the exact amount, most agree that it would take an ordinary laborer almost 20 years to earn 1 talent. So to put that into our economy, using minimal hourly wage, A talent would be equivalent to roughly $300,000. Well, we're focusing on this message on discovering and developing and deploying our spiritual gifts. This parable has a first reference to how we invest our money. It says a secondary application to how we use our God-given talents and supernatural abilities. This reminds me of a story I read once of two men who crashed their private plane on a South Pacific island. One of the men brushed himself off and proceeded to run all over the island to see if they had any chance for survival. When he returned, he rushed up to the other man and screamed, "This island is uninhabited. There's no food or water. We're going to die." The other man leaned back against the fuselage of the wrecked plane, folded his arms, and responded, "No, we're not. I make over $100,000 a year." The first man grabbed him and shook him and said, "Listen, we're on a deserted island. We're doomed." The other man, unruffled, responded, "It's okay. I make over $100,000 a year." Mystified, the first man was taken back with such an answer and repeated, "For the last time, I'm telling you, we're lost. It doesn't matter how much money you make because there's no one around to help us." Still unfazed, the first man looked at the guy in the eye and said, "Don't make me say it again. I make over $100,000 a year and I tithe 10%. My pastor will find us." Let me put you at ease this morning. I'm not going to preach a message about tithing except to say that if you make that many shekels a week, I will track you down somehow. Let's go back to the story. The master gives the first servant 5 talents, which is about $1.5 million. That's an amount I can't even fathom, okay? If there was $1.5 million like sitting, I couldn't even imagine what that would look like. I've never even seen that much money. So the second guy, he gives 2 talents, which is approximately $600,000. The third guy got $300,000. And even though there's a big difference between the 5 talents and the 1 talent, the guy who received 1 still had a lot of money. That reminds us that God gives out of His abundance to us. Out of His abundance. I want you to notice that each of the servants' talents receive those talents according to his ability. Your responsibility is tied to your ability. That's an interesting point. God's kingdom purposes do not operate according to what is fair, but what is best. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, after challenging believers to be united by not breaking into subgroups and following different leaders, Paul writes, "What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants whom you came to believe as the Lord has assigned us His tasks." Did you catch that? Each of us has been assigned a task. Our job is to be faithful to what He has given to us to do. You might have what you have because God has given it to you. He expects you to manage His gifts within boundaries of that ability that He has wired into you. As Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, there are different kinds of gifts, service and workings. And the Holy Spirit distributes these responsibilities to each one just as He determines. God entrusts different stuff to different people according to His sovereign purposes. In other words, He knows what we can handle. Our job is to be faithful with whatever we have to work with. Do we trust that God knows more about us than we even know about ourselves? I hope so. The third point I want to have you look at today is that we must invest what we have been given. Verse 16 tells us the man who received 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. He didn't waste any time, but immediately went to work on his investment strategy and doubled his master's portfolio. We can see right there why the master gave him 5 talents. He didn't sit back and wait. Okay, well, the master just left. I've got time. I'm going to just relax, kick back on the farm, and I'll get to it next week. No, he went to work right away. He had a strategy in his head, and he went to work, and it benefited him. The guy who got 2 talents did the same thing, only the text doesn't say he went to work at once, like the first guy did. We know that he worked hard, however. because he also doubled his master's money, ending up with 4 talents. Verse 18 describes the different approach of the third servant. But the man who received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. You know, even though we didn't read about any specific instructions that the master had given, the first 2 guys went to work and multiplied their investment. The 1 talent guy was a slacker who went off and buried his blessing. The practice of hiding valuables in the ground was quite common back then. It was one of the safest, albeit least profitable, ways to protect your possessions. I want to tell you a story about a guy named Antonio. Antonio loved music, but his voice was high and squeaky. He didn't make the tryouts for a boys' choir in his town. Yet he took violin lessons, and the neighbors persuaded his parents to make him stop. Yet Antonio still wanted to make music. His friends gave him a hard time because his only talent was whittling. When Antonio was older, he served as an apprentice to a violin maker. His knack for whittling grew into a skill of carving, and his hobby became his craft. He worked patiently and faithfully. By the time he died, he left over 1,500 violins, each one bearing the label that read Antonio Stradivarius. They're the most sought-after violins in the world and sell for more than $100,000 a piece. He couldn't sing or play or preach or teach, but his responsibility was to use his ability, and his violins are still making beautiful music today. Our potential is God's gift to us. What we do with it is our gift to Him. Zig Ziglar has said that you are the only person on earth who can use your ability. Are you investing what you have been given regardless of how much it is? Or have you buried your blessing and kept it hidden from others? Another point is that a day of accountability is coming. None of us wants to be audited by the IRS, but we're all audited by the Almighty. We all have to give an account for how we've used what we have been given. Look at verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. Jesus is coming again. Have no doubt about that. And there will be a day of reckoning. While most of us believe this in our heads, we don't always live with eternity in our hearts. If we would think more about His return, then we'd be focused on making an eternal return on our investments. Romans 14:12 tells us, "So then, each of us will give an account of himself to God. It's the duty of the servants to always bear in mind that the master would be returning and would settle his accounts with them one day." We need to be faithful in whatever He gives us to do. He's invested something in you, and one day He's coming back to claim it. Your job may be big or may be small, but whatever it is, do the best with your ability, and you'll be ready for that audit. Would it be terrible to be ashamed and unprepared when Jesus came back? In 1 John chapter 2, we are told, "And now, dear children, continue in Him, so that when He appears, we may be confident and unashamed before Him at His coming." Serve in light of a future reckoning. But it shouldn't be because we're afraid. Okay? The service shouldn't be because, man, I'm afraid of what God's going to do when He comes back. It should be out of joy that God has given me this gift and I want to use it. Think about this. If you spend your life chasing earthly goals, earthly recognition, earthly accolades, all of those things, when God comes back, He's going to take your life's work and put it on the altar and say, "Okay, this is what you've done with your time." And it's going to be tested by fire, put to the fire. Now imagine if you've lived your life for all those earthly accolades, all those earthly accomplishments, and you see that put to the flame. All of us burn up. How are you going to feel? Man, I just wasted all my time, all that energy, all that effort, going after things that don't last. It turns to ash. But when you chase after things that matter to God, and they're put to the fire, they stand the fire, they last. to eternity. It would help us to get in the habit of asking the question, how will my money management or this decision that I'm going to make to serve or not serve look on the day of accountability? The next point is, what we do with what we have reveals our view of God. As we come to verses 20 through 25, we see that the man who had been given 5 talents brought 5 more back. And the language is insightful here. He says, see, I have gained 5 more. The word see or behold, or look, is a way of drawing attention. Something big. He was eager to invest what he had been given, and now he's excited to show the master what he's done. He's bubbling with enthusiasm. You can almost, see this guy. Hey, look what I did for you, teacher's pet kind of a guy. He couldn't wait to present what he had to please the master. The man with 2 talents approached this time of reckoning with the same anticipation and excitement. The master was thrilled with both of them because they had demonstrated responsibility with their ability. He says the exact same thing to both of them. Well done, good and faithful servants. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The master increased their resources after they had proven themselves faithful. Jesus said a similar thing in Luke chapter 6, give and it will be given to you. The 2 faithful servants received a few things here. First, they received affirmation. Great job. Well done. I appreciate your good work and your faithfulness. Who wouldn't want that? Right? Who wouldn't want that from your boss? Isn't it always nice when you get that attaboy? We all like that. It's just human nature. They also received a promotion. Since you've done so well with what I've given you, I'm going to give you even more responsibility and opportunity for growth. And they also received celebration. You've made me very happy. Let's celebrate together. The phrase, well done, can be translated as excellent or wonderful. They were faithful and called good because they had a right view of the master. Likewise, when we see God for who He is, we will want to be faithful with what He has given. He's looking for faithful people, for those who properly manage their resources for the kingdom's purposes. And when we're responsible for what we have been given, we'll be given more responsibilities. I picture a smile on Jesus' face when He says, come and share your master's happiness. The 1 talent guy came with a bit more reluctance than the other 2. And he said, I knew you were a hard man. Notice the first words out of his mouth were about himself. I knew. We could translate this as, I always knew. The other 2 guys kept the focus on the master when he returned by saying, Master, you entrusted me. This 3rd guy had a wrong view of his boss and had his mind made up even before he received his talent. He looked at him as someone who was a hard man and a harsh man instead of loving and gracious. A.W. Tozer has said that was right when he said that what we think about God is the most important thing about us. If we view God as a tyrant, then we'll filter everything through that lens. Some of you might be secretly angry with God because you think He did this or that in your life, or didn't do something that you think He should have. As a result, your view of Him will be skewed. Your preconceived notions prevent you from seeing Him as a God of grace. And as a result, you refuse to serve Him with what He's given you. When we blame God, we end up burying our blessings. A faulty view of God can also lead to excuses. In verse 25, the man declares that the reason he didn't do anything with what he had been given was because he was afraid. His fear paralyzed him, so he decided to play it safe. He hid the money to make sure it wouldn't be lost. And he accomplished exactly what he set out to achieve. Nothing. Like the saying goes, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. A wrong view of God always leads to fear. So I was afraid. I went out and I hid your talent in the ground. The right view of God always leads to faith. If you're struggling with fear today, the best antidote is to further your understanding of the character of God and ask Him to grow your faith. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving ahead in spite of your fears. I think the first two guys were probably a little afraid as well. I would be. Given that much money, if somebody said, "Hey, Jim, here's $1.5 million. I need you to invest that." Isn't there someone more qualified? You know, certainly you can find someone better than me, to do this for you. No. But they were a little afraid, I'm sure, but they knew the master's character. Instead of being frozen by fear, they stepped out in faith. So let's look at the differences between the two servants who served and the one who took a dive. The first two were determined to make a profit. The third was determined not to take a loss. The first two were willing to work hard and take risks. The third took no risk. The first two received the gift. The third refused the gift. The first two wanted to advance the master's domain. The third had no interest in what mattered to the master. The first two viewed the money as an opportunity. The third saw it as a problem. The first two allowed the master's gift to change their lives. The third refused to let the gift touch his life. The first two invested. The other one wasted. The first two saw a blessing. The third guy saw a burden. The first two knew the master. The third guy had no clue. Next point I want to make is that what we have, we must use or we will lose it. Verse 26 says that the master saw right through the flimsy excuses of this guy, and he said, "You wicked, lazy servant." The word wicked means evil, hurtful, or malicious. In other words, the master's saying, you're lying. In your heart, you are a selfish, lazy bum. If you really wanted to do something, you would have put my money in a bank. So at least I would have had some return on it. But I see right through you. Those are pretty strong words. God is telling us here that He's going to judge not merely for doing wrong, but for not doing right. The man was wicked because he deliberately misrepresented both his master and himself. He falsely accused the master of being harsh, and he lied in verse 25 where he said, "See, here's what belongs to you." He actually owed his employer not only one talent, but also whatever it would have earned had he been faithful. Amazingly, instead of owning his guilt, he behaves as if the master should have given him credit for being so cautious. Wickedness and laziness partner together to keep many people from full surrender and service. In the original, this combination of terms is unforgettable because they rhyme. While the other two servants were busy and working hard, this sluggard dug a hole, little realizing he was digging it for himself. A selfish heart coupled with an unwillingness to do anything about it will take many people on a path of destruction that can lead to a place of weeping and gnashing of teeth. We all have an element of laziness in us. We all do. And our culture seems to be set on slothfulness as well. A few years ago I read that Nintendo was looking to hire some people for the summer at a wage of $100 a day to play computer games all summer long. I know a few people who could play that, or who could take that job. Scott. I'm not saying it's a bad job, but I'm not saying that I would turn it down if somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to play $100 a day to play video games." That would be, I'm convinced that laziness is extremely dangerous to our spiritual lives, though, as well. When we think we can put something off until later, we eventually discover that it will be one day too late. Proverbs chapter 6 tells us, "How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep?" And later on in Proverbs 10, we read this, "He who gathers crops in the summer is a wise son, but he who sleeps during the harvest is a disgraceful son." In Proverbs 13, Solomon tells us, "The sluggard craves and gets nothing, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied." And finally, in Hebrews chapter 6, we are told this, "We want each of you to show the same diligence to the end, in order to make your hope sure. We do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. Because the third guy did not use what he had been given, he lost it, according to verse 28. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10. It's the use it or lose it mentality here. Don't hold on to what you have because you're afraid of losing it. Develop it, compound it, multiply it by using what you have been given. And finally, our last point here is that who you know and what you do will lead to either abundance or agony in the next life. In verse 29, we learn that those who are faithful with the little things will have abundance or excess. For everyone who has been given will be given more, and he will have abundance. Those who have given themselves in full surrender and selfless service will be given even more opportunities. Now, on one hand, you might be saying, well, that doesn't really sound too good. You know, if I give of myself and I serve others and all of this, that you're telling me that Mother Teresa, who gave her life in service, in eternity, she's going to be serving still? No. It's a celebration. It's a different kind of service. You're going to be given more responsibility to be a bigger blessing, to spread more of God's kingdom. It's going to be amazing. On the other hand, though, those who bury their blessings will face agony. Jesus concludes his parable by saying that the worthless servant will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This description is used elsewhere to refer to hell. Those who don't know God don't serve him. A lack of serving may indicate that a person has never truly been converted or saved. That's why Jesus referred to them as worthless. A believer has worth because of his faith in Christ. The servant lived in the house of the master, but he did not know and he did not love the master. A distinguishing mark of a true Christian is service and giving. The lack of service betrays a heart where Jesus truly doesn't live. The Christian who is not using what God has given them is a contradiction in terms. As you survey your servanthood area of your life, you conclude that you've buried your blessings. Or maybe you haven't yet been saved, or you haven't really fully committed to that. Do you want abundance or agony in the next life? Determined to know the Master and to serve him wholeheartedly. Don't hide the truth. Don't bury it. Allow the greatest treasure of all, Jesus Christ, to radically transform your life. Stewardship is best defined as the use of God-given resources for the accomplishment of God-given goals. How do you line up with these 7 principles? What we have is not ours. We're given what we can handle. We must invest what we have been given. There is a day of accountability that is coming. What we do with what we have reveals our view of God. What we have, we must use or we will lose. Who you know will lead to either abundance or agony in the next life. Have you ever seen that show, Antique Roadshow? I like watching just how many people bring their stuff to the appraisers to find out how much it's worth. Many times, those who have lavish items come on the show thinking that they have, some huge hidden fortune. More often than not, they find out their treasury is a forgery and or a duplicate and worth very little. Where they come in and they have this grandiose, well, I have this has been in my family for years, and we have this in a distinguished place in the house, and da-da-da-da-da. Oh, yeah, well, that's a copy, and, it's not worth 50 cents. And they're just devastated because they had their whole ego was set on that item or that thing, that possession. And because I have this, I'm someone. Guess what? It's not worth anything. And you see that disappointment on their face when they realize that they've placed their value, their self-identity in something that's worthless. And then there's some people who come in with a small trinket or a painting or something that was up in their dusty attic, and they just thought it was cool and wanted to show it off. And many times these people discover that their item is worth far more than what they thought. The people who are hoping to hit it big with their extravagant item are a bit like we are when we think we can impress God with what we have. On the other hand, some of us think that we don't have much to offer, but what we have is really a treasure from God Himself. You know, I think there's people who, I talked about encouragers last week. There are people who can't sing a note, right? And maybe they don't know that, and we wish they did. But there's people who can't sing. There's people who can't play an instrument. There's people who have no artistic ability. They're not technologically savvy. They're not good organizers. And they're thinking, man, you know, what can I do in the church? I have no gifts whatsoever. But they can sit with someone and listen to them. And truly, have you ever been with somebody who's a really good listener? Oh, they're a gift. Just to be able to sit with somebody and let them pour out everything that's going on in their life and just truly be in the moment with them and listen to them, that's a gift from God. That is a true gift from God. Being able to say just the right word to somebody when they're having a horrible day, that's a gift from God. It may not be the big flashy gift. You know, you're probably never going to be on America's Got Talent for being a good listener. You know, but who cares? That good listener can change so many people's lives. A good encourager can change so many people's lives. When you've got that asset, a prayer warrior, you know, I mean, you know, we don't usually like hold people, well, this person can pray really, really well, you know, I mean, that's not a gift that is usually showcased. But having somebody who is so ardent and just such a prayer. Pope John Paul II, I used two Catholic references in one sermon. But Pope John Paul II was denoted as being someone who was such an ardent prayer warrior that when he prayed, people who observed him would say that in his private prayers, that it was like he was having a conversation with God. If you can pray like that, you're a prayer warrior. Okay? And that's a valuable gift. Use it. Use it. There's so many people who need prayer. That is such a gift. It's not a worthless, well, who cares if I can pray really well? I do. Let me know. If that's you, let me know. You know, we can use people like that. God can use that gift. It's amazing. Don't hide it. You know, don't just keep that to yourself. If that's a gift that you have, man, let me know. That's an amazing gift. So those little trinkets like that can be so valuable. Don't overlook them. Our responsibility is to use our ability to invest in God's kingdom purposes. Jesus has placed His business in our hands and will someday come to judge our faithfulness. Are you partnering with Him or are you making excuses? Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I do thank you for this challenging passage that your Son had used as the parable of the talents. I just pray, Lord, that you would find each of us to be ready for your return and eager to show you what we have done with the gifts you have given us. Lord, I thank you for each of those gifts, whether they're the big gifts that we see or the small behind-the-scenes gifts. Each of them are important, Lord. So whether it's 5 talents or just 1 talent, Lord, I pray that you would just help us to know how to use them in our life to build up kingdom purposes. And I pray this, Lord, in your Son's holy name.